Our next presentation is AI meets category management. What's next? We will find out from James Tenser, storyteller in chief at VSN Strategies. James, take it away.
Well, thanks for that kind introduction, John. It's great to be back again at the Lead Marketing Conference. We're going to talk about something that's on a lot of people's minds. That's what we might call the category management revolution. That is an inevitable result of the arrival of artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is there's so much said about it these days that it's almost unavoidable. And a lot of what is said, let's say it might be questionable to a lot of people. In other words, it's hard to separate AI hype from hard facts. But every business process that we are engaged in our industry of consumer products, marketing and retailing is being touched right now by some kind of artificial intelligence innovation. So to get ready for this talk today, I did some investigating. I spoke to a few experts. I drew from some experiences I've had with AI pioneers who were developing solutions a few years back. And I'm going to give a high-level review today, try to discuss some opportunities that are imminent, and maybe a couple watch-outs for brands as well. As we know, category management is perhaps the most ubiquitous business process we have in this industry. It has 30 years of history, 30 plus years of history. And we're starting to hear now from the vendors who provide solutions, enable category management decision-making, that AI is starting to be embedded. So what can this promise for us? Well, can we make decisions faster? Possibly, yes. Can we be more responsive to changing market conditions within the process? Can we forecast better based on better information as an input? Can we plan better strategically? And what is this going to mean for the way we do business going forward? Well, let's look into that. I'm not the only person out here saying that category management is a natural for artificial intelligence. And this quote, which comes from a PwC consulting report, as you can tell from the spelling of organizations, it was published in the UK, but it's worth reading out loud. AI integration in category management is expected to usher in a new era of efficiency, agility, and strategic decision-making. We've been hearing this a lot, right? It doesn't take a genius really to guess that AI is going to have an impact on the way that we do our day-to-day business process. A lot of times the conversations zero in on speed of data analytics, of decision-making, and I think it will supercharge category management. I also think that category management is highly suitable for artificial intelligence, partly because it already exists as a defined integrated business process that's widely familiar and widely used. Now it becomes sort of the activities being empowered by AI. I also think AI is going to bring new abilities, especially to connect the dots across dozens of new unique data sources. There's a new data pool here that we have been unable as human decision makers to access in an efficient way, and that's about to change. So let's step back for a second and talk about the vocabulary that this industry has thrust upon us. And I think there are a couple of concepts here, especially in this brief statement from an MIT professional education document that I found. I was looking for a good definition of artificial intelligence at the risk of repeating something you already know, but it is the ability for computers to imitate cognitive human functions, such as learning and problem solving. And you notice I highlighted or I colored that word imitate, because we should never, as we discuss this subject, confuse artificial intelligence for actual human brains. It's an imitation, and in some ways it's an improvement on the way our own minds work, but it is not a replacement. Artificial is the right word here. And it can solve many questions that humans cannot by sheer brute force some of the time, just by scanning and absorbing more data than you or I could ever read in a lifetime. And they can do it in minutes. And they also can be trained. AI entities can be trained to get better and faster over time at answering questions that we need to ask routinely. So it's great for repetitive, cyclical decision making. When we think about what tools do for us, what AI tools do for us as humans, I think about Marshall McLuhan, the philosopher that I followed for a long time. He's really a media thinker, right? But he called mass media extensions of man. And I see AI similarly. I see them as extensions of human capabilities. They're modeled after us, but ultimately synthetic. And we should never lose sight of that as we seek the best ways to apply these into our business activities. Now, the panel on the right here talks about some of the vocabulary that's becoming quite familiar now. Generative AI, that refers to the chat GPTs and their ilk that are creating large language models, ingesting everything there is to know from anything in the internet and trying to use that as the foundation for a certain kind of intelligence. We're hearing the capability to make queries using plain language, ask a question in normal conversational tone and get a fairly precise answer from an AI. Machines can learn. They can recognize patterns and data that we are not simply capable of discovering because of our own limitations. They can analyze that information and provide predictive results, things that are likely to happen, forecasts that we couldn't do without these tools. They can look at images and other non-structured data and provide insights from that as well. And we're starting to hear that, gee, we're going to have some agents that we're going to be able to engage, AI agents, that are going to do our bidding for us going forward. And that may include some of the activities that every day now we're engaged in, very tedious activities just to make our everyday decisions. So a quick review about classical category management. It's been an incredibly enduring business process. And the classic 8-step model, or 6 or 12, depending on how it's been implemented in your organization over the years, it was originally developed by Dr. Brian Harris. He was a professor at USC around 1989, and he was a co-founder of the Partnering Group. And Brian has been one of the leading thinkers on this subject throughout that time. It's hard to imagine, right? More than 3.5 decades. And other thinkers, great thinkers, have extended and altered and added to this process in ways that are in use every day by professionals in the retail side and also on the brand side. And notably, it's a recursive, right? It's a loop. Periodic improvements, define, assess, plan, measure, implement, look back at it, and start all over again. But it can also be a rigid thing, right? And this is the fault of creating any kind of structure like this. Definitions and roles in particular have tended to be pretty static over time when I say category definitions and roles. And each category plan is ultimately, of necessity, has been like an average across the range of shopper preferences. So in a given retail environment, for a given category, there tends to be a single role selected, and it is assumed as the best option across the breadth of the shoppers who come into that retail environment. And that's obviously not perfect, but it was a huge improvement over doing things item at a time, as it had been in the early days of supermarketing. Well, now we can add some new ways to identify breakthrough opportunities using AI tools. As we said earlier, we can absorb more data from more sources. We can be perhaps more responsive or more quickly responsive to changes in marketing conditions. And we can identify most valuable segments or highest potential segments in our target shoppers and consumers who are likely to buy the brand, and try to define strategies to reach those groups that have the greatest profit potential. All of this is enabled by AI, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that is possible. Well, now, when we talk about data sources, I'm going to fall right back on a cliche you've heard many times, the walled garden. And the walled garden is a metaphor, really, that refers to the data that resides within the walls of the retail organization, which they control. It's very valuable to both trading partners. And it has been, I think, a desire of brand marketers for as long as I can remember to have more and freer access to that information in order to drive their decisions and their strategies. Now, category captains and brand managers, category managers and the retailers, they've traditionally folded in traditional data sources, the syndicated panel data, the market share, ACV stuff, competitive prices as well, and research data in with the walled garden contents, the demand data, the loyalty data, the basket and trip analyses, the inventory status too. So performance at the store actually is a factor here in understanding the outcomes of any plan. So that's been the norm for some time. It's a lot of work. It is very often the job of the brand to do that synthesis, perform that synthesis, especially if they are the designated captain in a particular category, to help the retailer with their overall plans on the fundamentals, right? It still comes down to space, assortment, price, promotion, the basics, right? Now we're seeing something emerging, which I think is fascinating. We're starting to see data input into this analysis from the outside world, from the social media world, digital life, the influences that affect shoppers and predispose them to certain decisions later in their shopping trips. Social sentiment. Also, this is an indication of what they're talking about and what their opinions are in their social media interactions. Their search activity, certainly. Again, this is taking place outside the walled garden or the traditional data sources. And of course, retail media interactions as well. And there's more to it as also, I think, but those areas in particular, now there's an opportunity to fold them in to the strategic planning process. And that's a game-changing potential. There are new indicators. We may understand not just what shoppers are doing currently, but what they may be likely to do soon based on some of the behaviors that we observe out in the market. I want to talk about that a little bit more later, but in fact, there is information posted every day by literally millions of shoppers that gives clues about what they are interested in and what perhaps the next big trend is likely to be. And retail media, of course, has created whole new data sets based on message delivery and offers and conversions, what messages have been sent out through which channels. These are sources of consumer behavior that simply didn't exist when category management was conceived. I want to talk about speed now. With all of that data coming in, well, how do we cope? This is certainly not something that humans have been very good at innately. There are a lot of warriors in our business who spend a great proportion of their lives looking at very elaborate workbooks in Excel or other tools. Sometimes they have custom platforms that manage data. That expertise has been a core and high value resource for companies for a long time. But we're limited as human beings when it comes to the number of data sources we can manage. We can't see all the sources the same way a large-scale AI model can. We are not capable, therefore, of seeing data patterns or patterns in that data the same way that an AI intelligence can. It's possible because of the speed in which that data is absorbed into our AI tools, that they're going to see opportunities or trends a lot faster, even than a human being with the best intuition and experience can. And AIs are relentless, right? I mean, it makes you think of Terminator, right? I mean, in a sense, not relentless in the scary way, but they're simply tirelessly monitoring the data sources that we look at. There is also a chance to move planning from hindsight-based planning, in other words, a recent look back at what happened last year, to foresight-based planning that starts to bring in those external data sources that weren't available before. And I'm also convinced that artificial intelligence will let systems trigger or signal humans to next best actions when it comes to merchandising and competitive responses. In other words, what do we do next out of a host of choices? How do we decide what is the highest priority? From my conversations, I'm also hearing that AI is allowing planners now to identify most valuable segments who buy a brand in a particular category, or who will buy the brand based on the indications that they're pulling in from other resources, and help define strategies that can lead to breakthroughs in those categories. Because it may not be that a category's health is defined by how much your entire shopper base buys, but it may be a very significant, important segment that is carrying much of the performance of that category because they have an affinity for it. And making sure that we're communicating to those people in the right, best way may be the key to category, really stepwise improvement in category performance. And of course, if we do this planning and all of this brilliant work, we sure better be ready to do the merchandising to support it. And that's where the next best actions come in, because we know at retail we can't implement every task well, not every time. So how are we going to decide which ones of those do we focus on first? And we're going to come back to that a little bit later as well. But food for thought. And here in our market, there are some companies that are stepping up to make this happen. And I want to talk about just a handful. Some are familiar, maybe a couple be new to you, but to let you know that this is where the action is happening, where AI is entering the solutions that some of you use every day, and some of you may be using every day in the near future. Let's talk briefly. And by the way, there's no commercial connection to any of this. These are just companies that I think are out there on the forefront, and I think it's worth looking at what they're doing for a moment. So Blue Yonder's solutions they're widely deployed. They're probably familiar to nearly everybody on this call, and they provide decision support tools for space assortment, clustering, forecasting, all the familiar decision realms that we work with in category management. And they're inserting AI capabilities and AI agents, to help improve decision support in these areas. So that for folks that are using Blue Yonder solutions today, they're likely to see AI, I'll say promises, AI innovations being added, and it'll enable some of those activities to happen with greater pace and possibly accuracy. dunnhumby and Circana and Nielsen IQ all get this also, and they are major data players in our industry. Every one of them is looking at some kind of predictive artificial intelligence for the same kind of decision makings that we're making every day. Assortment, planograms, price, really comes out of dunnhumby. They're looking at shopper behavior as a basis for this. Circana is looking at their store audit data, their predictive analytics. And IQ has added AI to automate processes. They're training a large language model now for CPG category and customer analytics. Here again, they're familiar resources to many folks in the brand marketing and retail world, and they're evolving their solutions because they see the inevitability of AI being an excellent and important component. Two others here may be a little bit less familiar, and one I'll mention because it is fascinating to me, and it may be to you if you haven't come across it yet, is called Picasso. And Picasso is a fairly new player on the scene. They've created a novel and I think astonishingly powerful platform that ingests social media images from all over and identifies behaviors, consumer behaviors and preferences that can range from what new brands are emerging in popularity to what fashion trends are being exhibited by young people on the cutting edge. They're analyzing imaging, non-structured data, to detect and forecast trends that are happening today, but that will affect the merchandising activities in stores in the future. This is a remarkable thing, and I encourage you to look them up. But imagine, for example, let's think of a simple example. Perhaps it's a color trend in lipstick. A Picasso, the agent, if you will, is looking at hundreds of thousands, millions of images, and the selfies that are posted. It may pick up color trends among young women 18 to 30 and decide, you know what, that's where that generation is looking for a fashionable trend. And that could be an indicator of what colors ought to be promoted by a given brand. They may also pick up the labels on a certain craft beer in certain markets. Is that rising in popularity? Well, over time, period of months, you might see the frequency that craft beer label shows up in photographs may be increasing. That's an indicator of something on the horizon. It's fascinating because it's a new kind of data that we don't always get to see. And I hope I'm doing that description justice. It's worth a look. And finally, and I left this for last purposely, Intent AI. Intent AI is the newest company founded by that same Dr. Brian Harris with a few other brilliant colleagues. And they're bringing AI into the category planning process. So modifying the same 8-step process he was instrumental in creating now into one that's more like 13. And what they're looking at especially is the upper part of that process, that defining of roles, that ability to determine what the category definition is from the outset, so that they can embed predictive forecasting into that process. It addresses that problem that that category management activity has always been looking backward, hopefully at the most recent trends, but for the first time being able to incorporate new data sources. Maybe Picasso would be one of them, that suggests what is about to happen in the market and for which consumer segments. So Dr. Harris and I discussed this a little bit at some length, and he left me with this question, which I think is fascinating and should be very motivating and stimulating to folks in this audience. So who are the shoppers who are buying and who are not buying? What can we do to move their behavior? And are there segments of the total shopper base that are in fact dramatic opportunities in a given category? This is where we look for the future growth, the opportunity to really bring game-changing decisions to the process. Here again, the foundation of this is to use AI tools to search out and identify those breakthrough opportunities. And I would venture every company on this slide, to some degree or other, is talking about this general intention. Find the breakthrough opportunities for category management. I'd be remiss if I did not bring up this term about agentic AI, this notion that agents are going to do the work for us. And while I think it's true, my own instinct tells us not to over-attribute this. And what comes to mind is Amara's law. Roy Amara was a Silicon Valley thinker who said a pretty pithy thing here. Humans tend to overestimate the impact of new technology in the short run, but underestimate it over the long term. I think when it comes to AI value, there's a lot of overestimation right now in the short term, and perhaps underestimation about the lasting, the enduring change that it's going to provide in the way we do business. And part of this are the capabilities to automate some interactions using AI agents or agentic AI. Now, I'm not sure yet if we can rely on agents to possess judgment, to possess creativity. There's some talk of using them for collaboration. Like, could we get my agent to talk to your agent and work out the deal for this category? It sounds pretty arm's length to me. Reminds me of Hollywood, right? My people call your people. I don't know if we can trust the agents yet, but the development of reliable AI agents is on the roadmaps of many of the largest tech firms. We'll see how acceptable it will prove to be in our industry. But I will say this, agents can do certain things for us, including help us spend less time on reporting and free humans for more relationship building, trust building. We could have less time chasing and hunting down data, but maybe free us, the category management decision makers, to ask better questions and to actually set the spreadsheets aside and have a little more time for creative thinking and collaborative thinking. So let's say we can get this all done, right? We can really increase our decision-making process to a blazing pace. And we can make plans at a much faster cycle. What if we could plan our category and adjust that plan every quarter instead of every year or every 6 months? What if we could do it every month? What if we could do it anytime a circumstance in the market that's consequential were to change? Because that seems kind of like a phenomenal power of artificial intelligence, except we still have to deal with the physical world, right? You identify AI breakthrough category opportunities. Can you deliver them? And it's just not automatic. And I included this slide because it's a little bit of a sobering reality. The accuracy of inventory in the store is still a barrier. The IHL group, some of you probably have referenced this organization yourselves in the past, they published this a week ago in one of their presentations about the state of inventory accuracy. And it's still a barrier for this, right? When promotional compliance accuracy is, and this is self-reported, by the way, from retailers, about 60%. On-shelf availability, a couple points worse. Planogram compliance, another point worse than that. So retailers know that the plan does not always meet the reality. The rubber doesn't always hit the road, so to speak. Again, Dr. Harris had a comment about this. If with AI, we can more clearly identify the size of the new prize. You still have to go after those breakthrough opportunities to motivate everybody to get behind it. So how do we reconcile this? We can plan faster, we can be more accurate in our expectations, but can we get it done? And more importantly, are these inaccuracies also going to undermine the accuracy of the new plans we make? So how do we understand the results of our tests if they're not really implemented in the store? I know this has been, for me, this has been an issue I've probably hammered on over the years quite a bit. Can in-store implementation meet our planning capabilities? And what does it take? Well, obviously it takes doing the work. That is still mostly a human activity that has to take place in the physical store. And if we can't do it all, if we can't actually follow through on everything we plan, could we use AI to decide, what do we do first? That's the next best action concept that I think AI has great potential for. And I don't hear a lot about it yet, but I can tell you that that would be one of my postulates if it were for AI. Can we use the tool to help trading partners determine, when we have limited implementation resources, which activities should we pursue most for the greatest return? And I have a hunch that perhaps we might want to start with those breakthrough opportunities that AI helped us identify and make sure at the bare minimum that the merchandising activities to support those breakthroughs are happening with a very high degree of reliability. And maybe there's some things down the list we don't get to, but at least we're making sure that those with the most important return actually happen. So that's my postulate to all of you, and feel free to disagree or engage me in conversation about it. But I do think that that's one of the places where we'll actually see a monetary return on all of this if it's done well. Finally, how do we work together? So in an AI world, we can expect that annual reviews may not be as dense and slow as they have traditionally been. Those massive PowerPoint decks and all the months of work that go into them, it's possible that we'll be looking at a shared screen or some kind of a dashboard that the AI not only develops for us, but maintains on a continuous basis. So at the moment of the meeting, where do we stand today? We won't see late, missed, or changed data that in the gap between developing these presentations that we rely on and actually just coming up to the decision. Retailers don't have time, we think, to make constant merchandising changes in their stores, but they may need to spend more effort in keeping up, and maybe that has to be built into the total return conversation that trading partners have together. All right, if we're going to plan this to such a fine degree, are we making sure we know how to get it done? I think AI lets us cut to the chase sometimes and quantify some opportunities. And we should, for many decisions, have more confidence, more numerical justification for them. So again, to quote Dr. Harris, we can more clearly identify the size of the new prize, go after the breakthrough opportunities, which are motivating to both trading partners. And that also often is going to come down to those segments of shoppers who are likely to help drive category success. All right, to kind of regroup and sum all this up, I think there are four main ways that AI is likely to supercharge category management. It's a pretty complicated slide we got here, right? But let's talk about it a little bit. It's the planning cycles, it's the strategy, it's how we collaborate, and our ability to be predictive in those decisions. And by the way, I want to just call out Joel Cartwright's earlier comments today about using AI for data harmonization. Very relevant here, because a core capability for any AI-enabled decision process is having the data models maintained and making sure that everything is reliable. Otherwise, the AI is going to give you something just as inaccurate as your sources are. So will planning frequency increase? It sounds like it could. The AI advocates would say it should, but the limiting factor, as we just discussed, may be the implementation, the ability for us to actually follow through at store level. I think that's lagging. I do think that some of the store merchandising tasks and activities that are going on, they're being aided by artificial intelligence too. And I think making smart decisions about what tasks do we do first is going to be a critical part of that. Will AI be an enabler for collaboration? It's possible that we'll be able to use agents for some of that. It may be that it is going to allow us to work from more reliable facts, and where the facts can be trusted, very often the partners can trust each other. Are we going to make better strategies? Well, as been suggested, it may be that category strategies have been too broad-based up to now, and that it may be important not to ask what's the way to optimize the strategy within this role, or pardon me, the category within this role, but who are the segments of shoppers that are actually our greatest opportunity. Let's design our category plan to make sure that those high opportunity shoppers in the near future are going to be motivated to help drive our business. And that leads us right to that predictive aspect. Can we forecast based not only on our backward look of data within our walled gardens, the syndicated information, which also is based on panels and research data, and start to look ahead at what are shoppers likely to do and use external sources to help drive that. Things that, again, without the advantage of an AI agent or tool, we simply wouldn't have the bandwidth to examine. So we have a greater emphasis to collaborate, I think, for this. I think a lot of this is theory today, but it's rapidly becoming reality.
James, we
And
had a question. Yeah, James, we had a question that just came in that's pertinent. How are you defining promotional compliance? It's not a term I hear like the other two.
well, the simplest example is what percentage of paid for authorized displays are actually erected in stores? The answer is appallingly low. And it's been kind of a nod and a wink thing. Everybody knows, all right, I'm going to have end aisle displays in 100 stores, but the retailer may, and this is, I don't mean to diss them, but the retailer may be tempted to sell those end aisle displays several times to different vendors to maximize the revenue, but they don't have space to erect them. And I think for a lot of years, there's been a kind of understanding, well, we may not get them all, but that's the deal that we strike. Of course, when that doesn't happen, the brand's ability to evaluate the success of that display promotion is it's undermined, I would say. So that's a problem that's been identified for a long time. It's not discussed a lot because maybe there's a feeling that it can't all be resolved. That's one issue. I think that price promotions, trade price promotions, at this point, I think the implementation of those is probably far greater. Remember, that's more or less now a digital activity. Put the price out, making sure that the yellow tags are on the shelves. That's always been a manual process. Maybe it'll happen, but it happens a couple of days late in the cycle. I mean, those are the things that are hard to know, and I think it's slipped under the radar. My opinion, the implementation of electronic shelf labels is going to help make those things happen in a more timely way. So we may see some of the compliance for those promotion activities improve because some of the methods now of managing stores are also improving, and it's technology supported. I hope that's adequate discussion. I think that we can go on at great length about this, but other implementation aspects, as I mentioned earlier, regard the compliance with the planogram, and that's a discussion I'm hearing again lately. Not that easy to do, but when it's not done well, our ability to understand the validity of our decisions across assortment and space and pricing is undermined by that. So I mean, it all fits together. So that's a great question. It comes just as I was about to kind of make my concluding statement, and so I hope there may be more. But as AI lifts us from part of the burden of work, and we're going to hope that's going to free certain resources to support actions in stores, and that may include, in fact, making sure the physical merchandising is done right, that the paid for promotions are actually implemented in the store environment, and that's measurable. And if they're not, well, then let's discuss what should we really be paying for as brands. Perhaps some of that investment belongs in something else, like retail media, for example, where the total result is also more measurable. And I would refer back to what we just heard now from our friends at Keen Decision, because they had some great insights on that. So that wraps it up. My view is that category management is in the midst of a dramatic transformation, probably the most significant degree of change that we've seen in this business practice in our careers, in our lifetime. And this is just the beginning of this discussion. I think if we come back in a year, there's going to be a lot more tangible evidence and actions that are being taken in the marketplace. So with that, I want to thank everybody for listening. And of course, if there are any questions, any further questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Okay, we've got some questions. Uh, the first one, why should we continue to use category management at all? Can't AI agents just keep making incremental adjustments to the shelf sets? So we don't need category management.
Well, that's going to make that question might make some people a little squirrely, because we've been doing this for 35 years. There must be some value to it, right? It's an interesting idea. I think it's a conceptual question. What How would we organize this business activity, this enormous amount of work in a world where AIs could pick up a lot of the burden? I'm not ready to suggest that we go there yet. Let's put it that way. I think one can imagine, and this is almost bordering on science fiction, a world where an AI entity designs a better way to organize the entire store and make sure that the right activities take place. But the things that we'd be measuring, they haven't been invented yet, I don't think. We still need to understand the performance of an item in the context of its category, its contribution to store results in that context. If we disassemble it all and do some massive optimization that's AI can do, maybe not, there also follows the follow-through question when you get to the store itself. So let's say, imagine the AI was omnipotent enough to tell us, we're looking at the whole thing as one giant piece. And now we have plans for every item and every shelf in the store. Follow this and you're going to optimize your business. Even if it's right, it's going to be an interesting exercise to try and make it happen in the store. So this question, I think, leads us into almost a science fiction realm. I doubt that we're anywhere close to ready to make that kind of change in our industry today. Let's first get used to the decisions we already know and understand and learn how to make them better using the AI capabilities, the decision-making support, etc. That's just being introduced now. So that's a fascinating idea. It might be the source. Maybe I'll have to write a science fiction story about this. But I have a feeling if we ask the same question a few years down the road, it might be easier to talk more in tangible terms about it. But in my opinion, not yet.
And another question, you had experience removing the human review barrier with AI. I find people being unwilling to proofread is a large barrier for true large-scale implementation.
Don, I'm afraid I was getting a little bit of a computer voice instead of a clear sound. Would you mind trying to repeat that?
Sure, my pleasure.
Oh, you sound better
Have you,
already.
have you had experience removing the human review barrier with AI? I find people unwilling to proofread is a large barrier for true large-scale implementation.
That's an interesting question. No, I do not have that direct experience. I am, as they say, I'm a paid observer, which means that I'm really more of an analyst of things that I learn about in the market and that people share with me. Reviewing a plan, in my view, however, is essential. It is just not wise to accept anything without a certain amount of critical eye, especially when it comes from a new technology that we're just getting our legs under us. So how well can we trust the artificial intelligence to build these plans for us? Well, I would say on day one, you can, as they say, you can trust them as far as you can throw it. On year 10, we may have the accumulated experience to understand what's trustworthy and what's not. And that means that for right now, as we begin to implement and test these capabilities, there may need to be some A/B testing going on. There may need to be some hard questioning. It's very tempting to say, wow, this saves us so much work. We can get to decisions faster, but if those decisions are questionable or they're not bringing us the desired results, then that's a poor outcome. So this
Okay,
is,
our
you
mhm.
know,
Our attendee went on to elaborate a little on his
Please.
question, if you would. If you can use AI to create automated reports or alerts, not large scale plans, there's an unwillingness to allow anything to be sent to a client without reviewing.
I think today that's probably prudent. It doesn't mean that the objective over the longer term wouldn't be to gain sufficient confidence. Now, that is confidence to do that on an automated basis. The question that I would have to hand back is what constitutes a human review? If it means recalculating the same data sets from a blank sheet of paper, I think that's something that probably is not practical, but it might have to be done on a spot basis. And that's where the comparison might have to come up. So if we decided today, hey, we're going to just switch over and we're going to rely on the AI to do this reporting for the client, I think, I think that would be probably a dangerous choice because it's so early. And again, remember, we tend to want to expect dramatic results in the near term, and we underestimate what will happen in the long term. In the near term now, we're getting our feet wet. Despite all the discussion and hype in the market about artificial intelligence. So do I think that there should be at least serious spot checking going on about AI results? Probably yes. Do I think that's easy to do? No. Do you know what one of the best ways to do that checking might be? And you may laugh, but it'll be another AI. Just like a young woman I know who's an 8th grade English teacher, and who uses an AI tool to check the essays submitted by her students to find out if they've been written by an artificial intelligence. I think, believe it or not, that's possibly the strategic approach here. If humans are not capable of replicating and double checking from scratch the results that an AI tool provides, then maybe they need other AI tools that are able to challenge those outcomes so that over time we can understand, are we getting results we can depend on and act upon? So that would be my, I guess that's really a spontaneous suggestion. But if people can't do the checking, then maybe they need another AI tool from another vendor, from another developer that's able to double check. And I think that's a healthy thing right now.
Okay, last question. What do you think is the greatest opportunity when it comes to bringing AI into modern category management?
Well, probably the simplest and obvious one is what it can mean for workloads. Category planning has been a tedious process involving more and more data information over time. We have professionals who spend a great deal of their time nurturing their workbooks and bringing in data sources. My understanding, and I'm grateful I've never had to do that job, but my understanding from those who have is that this is hard work and it takes a lot of time and knowledge. Those people, in my opinion, are too valuable to have their time soaked up by tasks that they can automate successfully. They understand this marketplace very well. We need to free their minds, if possible, to think more creatively and strategically about what goes forward. So I think that's the first place that we'll see a benefit: decision-making support and the ability to bring in more data to support to enable those decisions.
Okay, no more questions, but one comment that came in that you'll appreciate, James, and
Thanks.
I second. I wanted to say great replies. James is one of the most reasonable speakers on AI I've heard, and he isn't over promising. Well, ditto.
Well, that's good. Well, thanks. Yeah, I think that's always the problem here when we think of any technology innovation we've seen over the last 20 years. It's always been presented to us as more than it is likely to become over the short term, and which is why I love that quote. that I mentioned earlier. But over the long term, this is here with us. And we just don't exactly know yet how it will affect the way we do our work in this industry. But it'll be here. There's no doubt in my mind.
Okay, James, excellent. Again, for further conversations with James on this very timely, topical topic that everybody is interested in, his email is on the screen, jtenser at vsnstrategies.com. Thanks a million, James.
All right. My pleasure. I've enjoyed doing this very much. Good day to everybody.